As you've probably noticed, there are a lot of things going on right now. There is the total collapse of our economy. There is Hong Kong going to the authoritarians in China. There is the racism allegations, turmoil, and everything continues. The mass immigration resumes, and so forth. So there are a lot of things to investigate, to go into more depth right now. And I must say that I have just shelved a number of projects, video projects, that I may pick up later. But today I want to take an easy route and just pick up on an earlier series and continue that one because it's easy. It just allows me to explore a concept that is still present anyway, and gives some more detail, some more meat for that discussion. And that was the discussion of the social justice warrior phenomenon, and in particular the analysis of one activist that is Kübra Gümüsay, the activist who does not want to be your cleaner. In my previous videos on that series, I have already discussed some parts of her speech at the Convention of Republica, and I will advance in that speech today. She is now heading into a section of her speech where she discusses her view of democracy, and I think that's also emblematic of how the left has twisted the meaning of the word. And so let's have a listen.
Warum müssen wir Liebe organisieren? Weil Freiheit, Gerechtigkeit, Demokratie, friedliches Miteinander, diese Werte haben wir nicht gepachtet. Sie sind nicht selbstverständlich. Und deshalb müssen wir sie gegenüber Extremismus jeder Art beschützen.
So what we have here is a line-up of words that are positively associated in our memory. Freedom, justice, democracy, peace, values. The way she uses them doesn't bear any resemblance to logic or true meaning. She's just lining those up, right? And freedom, justice, democracy, peace, that must be defended. And what does it have to be defended against? The enemy. What we have seen in the last years was a division of the public by our policymakers into the democratics, the people who are democratic according to the elites, and the AfD and the conservatives. So a bit like America, the word democratic, liberal is just assumed by a group that is actually authoritarian, and everybody else is just shut out of those concepts as if they had no meaning. And this is the takeaway from this very section. It does not actually have a meaning the way they use those words. It's just something people like. They just take something that people like and then they say, well, that's just us. That was one of the strongest alarm signals I heard in the last years, that Sigmar Gabriel, a famous politician, and after him a lot of others, just said that democracy, that's basically just us. L'état c'est moi. L'état c'est moi. That was a quote by Louis XIV or Louis XIV of France. He introduced absolutism to France, and he felt that whatever people want of the state is secondary to his own wishes. I'm not sure if he actually said it or if it was just ascribed to him, but it reflects how people felt. He was just seizing all the power and is considering the wishes of the people around him as secondary. He is the state. And likewise, the Social Democrats and the others around them later joined in, just claim that they are democracy. They are the way we govern ourselves. And of course, this builds on a misunderstanding, because in Great Britain and in Europe, democracy means just the Western system. In America, it means actually the opposite. It means a mob culture, whatever the majority wants, may be whipped up by a king, by the way. That is democracy in the American, from the American perspective, or the traditional American perspective, as the Founding Fathers envisioned it, right? That's what the Founding Fathers warned the public of, that they should not descend into democracy, which is mob culture. But when Europeans say democracy, they actually mean what the founding fathers of the Western system, Jefferson, John Locke, and so forth, what they thought was their system. Okay? That's why I usually choose the word Western system or Western political system or something to make clear that I actually mean us, I actually mean this, right? And I don't mean what socialists have in mind for democracy. And they very often just claim that America went out of democracy, and they don't present any principles or guidelines with what they actually mean could be a democracy. They just say to themselves probably that democracy is whatever they do, without any principles. Whatever they just want at a given point in time, be it gay marriage, be it abortion, be it whatever it is on their list, that's just democracy. It's not the principles with which a people governs itself, it's just whatever they want. And this democracy, as whatever we want, is to be defended against extremism of all kind. And you probably have heard this from Barack Obama. There's this horseshoe theory that, whatever people think, if they disagree with you, they are all extremists and, plane hijackers. They could be extremists of all kinds. And we all know actually who, but still there's this bucket of foes that everybody can fall into. There are some real villains just thrown in there. And then everybody who's just deemed as an enemy of the left. And in that same vein, democracy is also used as a fighting word. It's now the fight against the right. That's actually a phrase, we use it in German, Kampf gegen rechts, that is labeled democracy, and the Family Ministry has a number of projects, probably Antifa connected, that are flushed with taxpayer money to fight against the right. And not just some neo-Nazis, no, the right is basically now everybody who is against immigration or who wants less immigration. And just as an aside, Hong Kong is under pressure, and I want to make clear that I'm fighting for an immigration moratorium, but I am happy to make an exception for the people of Hong Kong. This is a demographic that is clearly ambitious, diligent, productive, smart, and freedom-loving. So they are a Western people. And you will, outside of Boris Johnson, you won't hear any Western leader creating a pathway for these people to actually come, because this would disrupt socialism and Islamism. And they are the real things these people care about. They don't really care about racism. But I think these are also the people Angela Merkel would be the last to accept in our country.
Nicht wie im vergangenen Jahr, als allein in den ersten 6 Monaten Anschläge auf mehr als 20 Moscheen verübt wurden und sich eine gähnende Stille breit machte.
Here, this is the fight against the right, and this is the direct follow-up from the previous video section. This is her reference to what she envisions as the extremism that's threatening democracy, in her opinion. Okay, democracy is the mosques, and people attacking them. They are toppling democracy. They are toppling the system with which we give ourselves our laws. This is totally upside down, obviously. I'm not saying it's okay to attack mosques, but also I doubt her numbers. I've already mentioned in a previous video of the same series that there are actually more attacks from migrants on the native population than the other way around. So this is very dishonest if she pretends that they are under attack when in reality the native population is actually under attack. And it is not democracy to stop that problem. It has nothing to do with it. Democracy, and I really want to emphasize this, is the system with which we give ourselves the laws. It is not about your pet problems or whatever, Democracy is the principles with which we govern ourselves. It's not something with racism. That might be a noble cause sometimes. There's more dishonesty now involved in that than honesty, but at its core, it's a noble cause. But not every noble cause is also democracy. And as the enumeration at the beginning of this video showed, what she tries to do is to appeal to good feelings. And I've also noticed over the past years that it's only women who get addressed in the public debate. Men are totally ignored. It's always about emotional appeals, and whatever sounds nice is offered. Logic be damned. And I don't want to sound as sexist as I do, but I feel reminded of a part of the book 1984 by George Orwell, where he describes the pro lyrics, the pro songs, the pop culture of his day, of that dystopian parallel universe, so to say. And there's this woman doing the laundry, and she sings, "Oh, there's an hopeless fancy passing like an April die." The birds, the streams, heart strings twisted. It's so cheesy and stuff. I just keep thinking over the years that we become ever more an hopeless fancy. There's ever more emotionalized news content. Men are totally ignored. It is not how I want to see women. It is possibly not how women in general are. Or at least, your individual woman is a bit above that. It's kind of the characteristic that's appealed to, that plays out stronger in dumber women than in smarter ones, obviously. But we have now all these women in power who seem to think very lowly of their fellow women, and they create this. They create these emotional appeals only. Logic be damned. Be hostile to men. Always engaged in bullying. Because women are very big in bullying, let's face it. This is how women elites paint women in the public. This is how they address women. If your individual woman is like that, is secondary to how this is played. How this is played by women, on women.
Wir, die Gesamtgesellschaft, müssen lauter sein als diejenigen, die Hass verbreiten und Ressentiments schüren, indem wir uns klarer positionieren, indem wir uns rechtzeitig positionieren und empören und wachsam sind. Denn wenn sich Menschen für ihre rassistischen Äußerungen nicht mehr schämen, dann sind wir mit unserer Empörung zu spät dran.
As far as I'm concerned, there is too much noise right now. And I've never thought that I would think like that, because I have two very conflicting instincts in my heart, so to say. There's one side of me that wants to memorize the Holocaust at all costs, no matter what. There was once a joke by Joan Rivers that was not very well crafted, about Heidi Klum, about how she looks hotter in a dress than even the Germans who pushed the Jews into the oven, something of that sort. And then she was lectured by the ADL, and she responded by saying, I keep the memory up. I keep the memory up. She did not say, well, that some jokes are duds, but that's part of the stuff. Some jokes will always be duds, right? But she, who was in the showbiz attention-seeking thing for her entire life, keeping yourself in memory and everything else, directing the attention, that was her life, right? She said that we will eventually forget. We will eventually forget the Holocaust, like all big traumas of mankind will eventually be forgotten. But she will do her best to keep the memory up, no matter what. And I feel very strongly the same. I also feel like Henrik Broder, who is the son of two Holocaust survivors and who had written a book called Forget Auschwitz. And he was just observing the memory culture, the remembrance culture, the lip services, the fake, the people who obviously don't care about Jews, who attack Israel all the time and so forth, and how hollow it is. And he is now running a conservative blog where he probably shifted his views from that time when he wrote the book to a place where I am now, that possibly we just want less. And I have not thought in my life that this would become a thing in my reasoning, that I cringe whenever somebody tries to even speak about the Holocaust or something about racism. I start cringing. Not because the problems are solved, but because it's done so badly. The wagon has derailed. I feel now at this point we even need maybe less to set the wagon back on the rails, to move forward, because now we have Islamists who claim to be worried about anti-Semitism just because they see it as a weapon. It has now become such a cheap political tool that the wagon has been derailed. It's now disrespectful as it is done. It is disrespectful to the victims of the Holocaust.
Der Hass macht uns träge, lethargisch. Lässt uns zweifeln.
It also has eaten your school assignments, hasn't it?
Verzweifeln. Dabei sind wir viel, viel mehr. Wir könnten viel, viel lauter sein. Denn organisierte Liebe ist ein politisches Werkzeug.
Yes, a political tool.
Erstens, verbreitet Informationen gegen Populismus. Verbreitet Artikel, Medien, Bilder, Texte, Filme, Informationen, die gegen den Populismus arbeiten, die das repräsentieren, wofür ihr steht. Zweitens, Aufklärung. Betreibt Aufklärung. Die Verantwortung gegen Vorurteile und Ressentiments zu arbeiten liegt nicht bei den Betroffenen, sondern bei der gesamten Gesellschaft. Wo kämen wir hin, wenn nur Juden sich gegen Antisemitismus und Schwarze gegen Rassismus wehren würden?
And of course, in reality, it would be great if she were for more speech to counter bad speech, but she is a part of a network that is constantly fighting against freedom of speech, particularly on the internet, and part of her speech here on Republika was already about that issue. She is also affiliated with the Neue Deutsche Mädchen group that's constantly lecturing media corporations on what words they are supposed to use and so forth. So she does not believe in the things that she claims to believe in. And the other issue I have is that she equates anti-Semitism with what she calls racism. Of course, now everybody is uncertain about these words. I have made a previous video, but I can't really say which one it was, to be honest, when I tried to explain what I understand as anti-Semitism, how I kind of recognize it, and I came up with things like double standards, a level of aggression, and an obsession. These things have to kind of come together. It's not just enough, to have a aggression when there's an actual conflict, for example, or if they're between people that's based on something else. But even if it is, you have to address it with reason and logic, and it does not help if you address it with aggression. That being said, racism was only a short period of anti-Semitism. It came up around the 19th century and then, of course, culminated in the Holocaust. But for most of the persecution against Jews, other pretexts and prevarications were used to do so, and very often it was combined with looting and that kind of stuff. So people enriched themselves by hurting Jews. So racism is really just a small episode in the anti-Semitic cultural context, right? And you have to understand this. Also, I think what we hear today about racism, most of this is like 80-90% of it is based on lies, and most of us recognize them as those because everybody has been asked for his accent once in a while, and nobody thinks it's a tragedy. It's not a trauma. We all know it. And also, if you are asked that question quite often, because some people just speak an accent that's not talked a lot on television. For example, if you live in London, your accent is far more represented on TV in Great Britain than your Scottish accent, for example. That's pretty normal. You are asked about your accent very often, also when you move from one country to the other. I speak an accent myself. I have been asked hundreds of times. You know that they claim to have a trauma that they don't have and that they are blatantly lying. Now, there are different types of lies. There is the lie, the white lie that just is in defense of something or whatever. But then there's also the false testimony against your neighbor. There's the lie, the vicious lie that's out there to destroy people. And I think actually anti-Semitism and racism is based on such lies, but they are now mostly associated with these people who claim to be anti-racist. They claim to be offended and hurt by things that are not offensive or hurtful. To wrap it up, she wraps it up.
Drittens, Empathie. Zeigt Empathie. Monika Lewinsky sagte, online we've got an empathy crisis. Es ist so einfach, online Menschen zu entmenschlichen, zu dehumanisieren, sie auf ein Erlebnis, eine Begebenheit, ihre Hautfarbe, Herkunft und Religion zu reduzieren.
She concludes that everything is basically about empathy, feelings, emotions. She speaks to the public as if they were only women. And this is a pattern you see through the media all day long. And it is particularly emphasized in Germany, where she operates. And so you are probably surprised that a Muslim talks like this. But it is the logical consequence of how effeminate the Western culture has become, and particularly Germany. So this was it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Bye.